And good evening. Welcome to a bonus Deltahead stream. I have been planning on doing this one for a little while. This is a kind of a look at an old Mac game series, excuse me, that I really liked when I was younger. It was probably ran, it was made, I think the first one was in 92. I think the last attention it got was somewhere like 97, 96. Evening, Peacher. Good to see you. Just recounting the years when Glider was active. Yeah, this was a game series that was very dear to my heart. It had a lot of charm and personality, and it also allowed for some content creation from its user base, which could then be uploaded onto AOL and downloaded, and people could play each other's, custom content. And probably the first creative game community I was ever part of back during dial-up days. So it's very close to me. And so I've been thinking about, like, what's the best way to sort of kind of honor that on a stream. And I realized I actually do already have some content created for it. And I made a little documentary. It's about a 20-minute documentary actually about the series. And that also looks at Glider 3, the earliest Glider release. So I actually think that's kind of worth watching. I put a lot of energy into it, and as long as there's going to be a stream devoted to it, that's I think it's worth pulling up. Something that you might notice will be a little unusual is the fact that if you've watched any of my YouTube videos, you'll know that I kind of have an over-articulated radio voice that I use, and that's because I've been told that some folks who are not native English speakers watch those videos, and the clear articulation helps them, so I go out of my way to be less colloquial and a little more crisp on the consonants. So, for anybody who's used to hearing my normal cadences speaking live, sort of off the cuff, that'll maybe be a little bit different. But after that, we can fire up an emulator, a Mac emulator, and take a look at what that game looks like, kind of the way that it would be played. And I have a special treat of a glider house that I myself created when I was but a lad of 14, with a lot of custom art and some of my earliest level design. And you also get a sense of kind of what I found funny when I was 14 years old, which turns out to be a lot of Monty Python and Simpsons. So, anyway, we can go ahead and watch that. Here we go. And I'm going to turn off the mic as soon as I start this going so I don't accidentally talk over it. So, 1 second. I'm James Howell, and this is Paper Air, a retrospect on Glider. This video trilogy looks at the Glider series of video games for pre-OS X Macintosh computers. The first game appeared as a shareware title programmed and designed by John Calhoun. Software publisher Cassidy and Green released an expanded version in 1991 titled Glider 4.0, and again in 1994 with GliderPRO. Many Macintosh gamers from that time remember the Glider games as among the most engaging, imaginative games on Mac systems 6 and 7. It was a high point of Mac gaming, and they were formative for me, giving me hands-on experience with level design, a starting point for some technical video game literacy. Everyone who goes into games professionally has a fire pit game that kindled the imagination and made games powerful. A lot of people got that experience from Sega and Nintendo titles, but Glider was that for me. The platform that ran the games has become more niche with time. Macintosh systems 6 and 7 are cumbersome to emulate on a modern Windows PC, so the Glider games have become obscure, and they risk being lost entirely. So, in the spirit of preserving a series of games that was important to a lot of people, these videos consider the Glider games from a number of different viewpoints, including concept inspiration, the kind of zeitgeist or context surrounding their development, and of course the games themselves. And we begin with Glider's first appearance as shareware. Glider first appeared as a black and white arcade-style game on Macintosh System 6 in 1989. I'd like to present this game kind of holistically as an artifact of its time, and that requires that we look at its specific inspirations as well as the more general context that conditioned it. John Calhoun got part of his idea for Glider from programming experiments when he made ASCII versions of the arcade games Defender and Choplifter. He also drew inspiration beyond video games, specifically the behavior of styrofoam peanuts when thrown over an industrial air conditioning unit outside a mall. Calhoun built the first version of Glider on a Macintosh Plus using the programming language Pascal. He also created the bitmapped graphics using Mac Paint, a graphic program that came as a pack-in with Macs at the time. As a matter of fact, early versions of the game documented the game's technical side, so learning programmers could use the game's code in their own quest for mastery. So, pulling these different sources of inspiration together, Calhoun took the real-world concept of airlift and built a 2D obstacle course for a paper airplane. The game circulated as shareware through his university's Mac FTP site under the label Soft Dorothy Software. This was a reference to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz as homage to Calhoun's native state, Kansas. The final and most polished version of shareware Glider is Glider 3 Plus, and that number indicates the game's version rather than its place in a series. In current naming conventions, the number after a title indicates new content and design for an established fictional setting. To kind of draw that out, Super Mario Bros. 1 differs from Super Mario Bros. 3. They have different ways of meeting generally similar design goals, and they likewise interpret the same characters and landscapes with different visuals. The number after the title reflects those changes. By contrast, the number after a shareware game on early Macs and IBM compatibles reflected degrees of refinement. Glider 3 Plus was Calhoun's third major revision of the game's code and design, and the number forefronted the development process. So, Gliders 1 and 2 were not games significantly distinct from 3, rather they were rougher forms of the same game that Calhoun considered finished as Glider 3 Plus. This numbering convention actually impacted the experience of being a shareware gamer at that time. In a way, forefronting the software version brought the player into the development process. You played the game and, by giving feedback, participated indirectly in its development. It's a relationship that current-day indie developers can maintain through outlets such as Kickstarter and Patreon. Shareware methods of payment and distribution also reinforced that sense of familiarity or participation. While a game's concept is very rarely inspired by the way it circulates, means of circulation do condition a game's scope, so it can actually reach its audience. We're going to look at that context in order to understand Glider as a shareware game of its time. For a frame of reference, we might think of shareware as a proto-indie style of making games and gaining an audience. The games were often made by one or two programmers, and the games were closely linked to the vision, personalities, and competence of specific people rather than teams. They had a kind of auteur quality. I call shareware proto-indie because contemporary indie games respond to the bottleneck of publishers that, dominate the market. In current parlance, the word indie refers to a cultural and even political division within video games, a response to the power exercised by publishers, determining which games get made, their design goals, and how those games get developed. To be sure, major software publishers existed at the time, such as Broderbund, Electronic Arts, and ICOM, and they made games considered high points of that era, such as Lode Runner, the King's Quest games, Shadowgate, Uninvited, and so on. But late 80s, early 90s, shareware programmers didn't compete with major software developers on a kind of ideological level or in frustration with AAA publisher bottlenecks. The two just coexisted. If you liked a game, the developer asked you to send cash, a check, postcard, or other payment to their address. No one had to pay for something they didn't like, so it was a low-risk way of gaming, particularly if you're a kid whose allowance couldn't stretch around a commercial game from Babbage's. In some ways, it resembled piracy or viral sharing, since you got mostly complete versions of a game for free until you decided to pay for them. However, whereas people pirate games against a publisher's wishes, shareware built itself on that casual circulation. John Calhoun stated that he only made enough money off Glider for a few pizzas when he was in college, and money wasn't his motivation in making the game, but voluntary payment is part of Glider's identity as shareware, so it's important to understand how that worked. Now we'll look at that casual circulation. Shareware worked exactly as the name states. File sharing through local BBSs, Usenet FTP, physical media, or major telecommunications services such as Prodigy, CompuServe, or the service my family used when I was a kid, America Online. There were constraints on connecting to larger services, including limits on data usage and charges for hourly access, not to mention a long-distance fee if you didn't have a number local to you. Even though players could play many shareware games entirely without cost, there was an incidental cost in acquiring the games. When you, as a gamer, are budgeting your data and time online, you don't want to risk your month's usage on something large that you weren't sure was good. Shareware games with small to moderate file sizes could get audiences more easily than very large titles. So it was a scrappy way of getting games to players without relying upon the exposure that a big publisher's game got in a storefront. The money side of shareware worked because of the software's distribution and vice versa. Everyone wants an audience even if they don't want to get paid, so these forces conditioned the kinds of games that people made. Glider's compact, focused design and its brevity worked well within these forces, making it more likely to circulate and gain the audience that loved it. So, with that context under our belts, we're ready to look at the game proper. I'm going to pause and slow down some parts of the playthrough to create time for commentary, so the game, in practice, moves more quickly than it appears here. The Glider's goal as the player's protagonist is to leave the house, so the narrative theme is freedom and escape. I always like how the game takes pleasure in paper airplanes as material objects, which is highlighted by the spawning animation in the upper left. Glider introduces the player to its core mechanic at the start, using floor vents for lift to move past static obstacles. The ceiling vent in the upper left will be important later, so just mark that in your memory. Notice that I used the far right air vent to gain as much height as possible before moving to the next room. Players will lose a life at the start of the second room if they did not gain enough lift at the end of the first. The second room isn't a real challenge if players start high enough, so the game is teaching players to leave each room as high as possible. The first and second rooms also introduce players to the paper copter obstacles moving from the upper right down to the lower left. At the start of the game, the copters are mainly threats for players who take too long before deciding to act. They become problems in later rooms, though. The third room teaches two things. First, it teaches players about ceiling vents. If a glider enters a black ceiling vent, it will pop out of the last all-gray vent that it passed, in this case, the vent that I pointed out in the first room. Because these receiving vents are on the ceiling, the glider can only enter them at the top of an airlift column. Rooms 1 and 2 teach the player to use airlift to pass obstacles and start each room on a good foot, and Room 3 teaches the player about the dangers of flying too high. The third room also teaches the player to fly under obstacles, which is the second lesson here about the dangers of too much lift, depending upon circumstance. Room 4 teaches the player to combine the knowledge learned from the preceding rooms to fly between these two tables. The end of the room also requires a new skill from the player, juking the glider back and forth to use the margin of an updraft in order to get around the table edge that partially blocks airflow. Room 5 introduces the player to special objects. The score increases the faster players move through a room, and clocks add bonus time to that invisible timer. The glider entered room 6 high, but this room actually teaches about electrical outlets as static obstacles. The return vent above pushes the glider down, so had the glider entered lower than it did, it would have been pushed into the electrical outlet, which would have caught the glider on fire. Room 7 teaches the player how to navigate between two shelves vertically. It also tests the player's ability to gauge how far a glider can move horizontally from a given height, since going too high sends the glider through a receiving vent. Until now, copters have been mostly background objects, but Room 7 teaches as well that copters are serious threats when the glider needs to navigate a tight space. They create a sense of anxiety, at certain points requiring the player to get lower to the ground than they would like. Room 8 requires the player to navigate vertically down between obstacles, and it introduces candles as special objects. Candles will set the glider on fire, of course, just as electrical outlets will, but their heat also creates lift for the glider. Players can move through Room 8 in two ways. They can either use the new knowledge about candles to fly over the shelf, or they can exercise a new skill of moving vertically to grab the clock. Room 9 teaches players about folded sheets of paper as extra lives, while also requiring the player to use lessons taught in previous rooms. Room 9 gives the players two ways through. The glider can fly over all the obstacles, or it can thread the needle to get an extra life. Getting the extra life creates a kind of anxiety, because the glider must enter the next room low to the ground, which the game has taught the player not to do. Room 10 does not absolutely punish the player for entering low, but it compounds the challenge from Room 9 by lifting the glider into an obstacle if the player reacts too slowly. The room also asks the player to use the core lessons already learned to move through the obstacles. It's an instance where the player is no longer being taught anything, but asked to use the skills learned. The glider needs to enter room 11 high in order to reach the thermostat and turn on the floor vents. The thermostat does not appear again in Glider 3 Plus, so it works as a new reason for players to use a skill that the player already learned, entering the room high. Room 12 is the devil. If the glider wasn't forced into the electrical outlet in room 6, the player will definitely learn how it works here. Not only must the glider navigate under and over tables while using lift from the candle, it has to sip lift off the edge of the central floor vent in order to avoid the paper copters. The shelf at the top here is really interesting. It's one of the few objects in Glider 3 Plus that doesn't threaten the glider as an obstacle, but it creates a sense of anxiety by lowering the ceiling of the room and, as well, turning a known safe area, the top of an air vent, into a perceived threat. The air vent won't actually push the glider into the top shelf, but the shelf affects the player emotionally, which is a super interesting design choice. Let's see if I can make it through this time. Very good. Room 13 gives players a new reward for using known skills, in particular gauging how far the glider will travel forward from a given height. By giving the player an air vent near the start of the room, the game gives the player a known safe spot. Flying too high will send the glider into the top shelf with a clock, so the safe spot isn't 100% reliable. If the glider keeps moving forward after hitting the light switch, though, it will crash into the lower table. The game expects the player to return to the first air vent as a secure place after taking a risk by flying toward the switch in the dark. Much like the high shelf in Room 12, this design affects the player emotionally. It requires the player to balance security and risk while also making the safe spot slightly unreliable, so the player has to decide when and how to trust the one piece of security that the level design provides. Room 14 forces the player to use their downward navigation skills with new precision. The player wants to start high up for the most room to move the glider past the leak, and a receiving vent awaits to discourage the player from asking for too much security. In a rare hiccup, this vent transports the glider to a room without a return vent. I'm going to just fast forward back to room 14. Now let's do this room right. There we go. Room 15 is the final room, and it poses an entirely new challenge: the bad cat. The cat is both a static and dynamic obstacle, and the glider has to fake out the cat in order to pass through the window. And here is the freedom that gives the narrative its oomph. Players can choose a different style of paper airplane called a dart, a more familiar style of paper airplane. The dart moves forward very quickly, but it moves backwards slowly. Its forward speed can simplify some rooms, but the slow reverse speed can make a handful of rooms extra challenging. Rather than play through the entire game again as the dart, I'll highlight moments that illustrate its differences. Getting this clock, for example, requires a fine touch. Threading the needle to get an extra life shows the danger of overcommitting with the dart, since it can't back out of a bad situation easily. Its forward speed can also make riding the edge of an updraft easy to bungle. Here, I played too conservatively and crossed the copter's path. Interestingly, the dart can move through the thermostat room without hitting the thermostat, but the game actually punishes this. If the dart misses the thermostat, the air vents in the following room will be turned off as well. The dart can hit the light switch without running into the table below, but this costs the player the opportunity to get the clock for a bonus. And the bad cat in the final room is often more challenging with the dart because a careless player can overcommit and find themselves unable to back out of the cat's swat. And that wraps up our detailed look at Shareware Glider 3+. The game is short and focused, and that density helped it circulate to become an early Mac favorite. It generates a lot of challenge out of simple controls and movement that are intuitive to understand. It's a fantastic example of the games of its time. In the next video, I'll look at Glider's commercial debut with Glider 4.0. Thank you for watching. So that is my little documentary on Glider 3.0. And again, I couldn't hear that, but welcome back to my non-radio announcer voice. And yeah, so actually in the spirit of what Viper and I were discussing in chat, I'd like to walk you through what the room editor looked like. As I mentioned in that video, a big part of the experience of this game was going through the house in the second release of it. But it also had an editor that John Calhoun, the developer, made for his own purposes so that he didn't have to try to just adjust a whole bunch of things in code, go test it to see if it looked and felt right. So he just made a visual interface, excuse me, for himself, and he released that alongside it, and that spurred, it didn't spurn anything, that spurred a fan community online, though, in AOL. And I can show you what that looks like here. So, second. I am pretty sure that the audio on this is well adjusted. If it is not, I'm going to apologize right now. Yeah, so this is Glider 4.09. Let's see if we can run this here. see, what are our controls here? Controls, configure. Yeah, okay, we're using the arrow buttons. Cool. So yeah, so oh yeah, so this was hold on a second. I'm gonna drop that for you. So this is one of the things that was good and also rough about Glider is this music. I'm going to die so I can turn this off. Hold on one second. So yeah, the probably the weakest part of the design is the background music, which is just that one guitar riff that plays over and over again. Evening, Shogi. It's good to see you. So the music is not dynamically controlled with player input, but the riff goes into that dun 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 that bit. The longer you stay in a room, there is a functional aspect to it, which is that your bonus is determined by how quickly you get through a room. So the longer you hear that riff go into the you know, bun da dun da dun da dun da bit, that means your extra points are going down. Nonetheless, it does get kind of obnoxious. When I was a kid, I had a lot of patience for it, and it's like burned into my brain. But we're gonna turn that off. Sound. Oh, right. So this is one of the problems with emulating this, is that you can't actually turn the music off, which is unfortunate. Let's see if we can just turn it down and make that be bearable. Let me see if I can drop my volume here so I don't have to listen to it. Yeah, I know. We'll go through a few rooms so you can kind of get a taste of it. Fortunately, the editor doesn't have music. So as you can see, the game itself is a natural extension of the earlier one, and it's kind of interesting as a published version of the game. Went through Cassidy and Green, the software publishers. It got kind of the 16-bit color, the 16-color glow up, and looks very clean. Looks very well lit, and the dark is super dark. The lit rooms are very lit and popping. And so it kind of contrasts very nicely with the sort of like very gritty look of the shareware version, which, you know, again, Calhoun made when he was in college. Just kind of, there we go. When he was a college student trying to get make something fun and get a little bit of extra money. So yeah, you can it kind of feels like Glider grew up. And there are some other features that it added, like going up and down staircases. And one other way that it grew up, this is something that is omitted in the video because it's really not the spirit of the channel, is you know, Calhoun was in college, and the game actually opens with a scan of a nude, which it's a very weird thing given how, I mean, very kid-like the game is, right? It's about a paper airplane, and then to have something so adult sort of just like show up right at the start when you launch the game. Yeah, and the thing is, it's, I mean, as far as news go, it is tasteful. It's not, you know, gross or anything, but all the same, as a choice, is somewhat unexpected. Evening, Margin. It's good to see you. This is also a joke that I think maybe, I don't know if this rings as well now, because this was made in the 90s, so this would have been, you know, people who were in the audience would have, if they had not lived through Watergate, would at least be aware of it. So having the shredder be called a fetomatic, for destroying evidence of crimes against the state is charming, and but also seems dated because I don't know if people even bother to hide that stuff anymore. There you go. But yeah, so the fact that that intro has been replaced with a sort of a drawing of Ozma of Oz, the Princess of Oz, is just another place where it feels like the game kind of grew up and matured. Exactly. See, shredding something is practically admitting guilt by showing anxiety. If you actually admit guilt boldly, then you're fine. And yeah, you could knock over a jar of grease, which your glider could slide on. I always like that little... You can tell the grease is registered in front of the airplane by this little pixel that shows up when you go over grease that you have not traveled across. I'll do it now and you can kind of see what I'm looking at. See right there? I always like that. And if you go back over that grease again... Oh, no. Alright, cool. Then if you go back over that grease again, you don't get that line again. So I kind of think that it's like a little bit of overlap of the sprite, some grease detection, and then you're off. And that is the closest I think the glider comes to having a voice. But yeah, so that's roughly what the game is. That's the house that was packaged in with it. And this is what made it magical. So yeah, let's do a new house. So yeah, so the way this kind of shakes out is you have 10 possible backgrounds that you can choose from. And this is sort of your blank canvas here on the right. So hit OK. This is our bare room. Now this there are a lot of different sort of decorations possible per room. So you could go to, let's see, room background, and over here these little tiles you can grab and slide over. So if I want to add a wall to my left, because this is my first room there, and actually, Shogi explained, I figured it might well do that, so that is actually one of the reasons why that is specifically omitted in the stream. That's just, I mean, having it registered as a fact is probably enough of the time. But yeah, so you drag these tiles over here, and then, bang, you have a little bit of room decoration. So you have the electrical shielding, the cracks in the walls that are very unshielded. It's kind of charming. This never felt dissonant to me when I was younger, but the fact that the cracks in the wall reveal a brick pattern, which is a stock pattern that you could fill graphics in on the old Macs, and that the bricks are so tiny compared to the other objects like the ceiling lamp. Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, but so yeah, so let's see, we start a room here, put a table down, and then let's say it's cool to have an obstacle on top of the table. The bricks aren't tiny, the house is huge, and paper airplanes are sentient. Yeah, Shogi, I have a strong affection for brick. Let's see, so let's add a vent here. Let's drop this down to here, and put one right here. Oh, let's get that back. And let's say let's put a reward up here. Let's see. We can put a clock. Let's get some points. That's cool. Put an alarm clock right there. And in addition to that, let's put a switch here. And see, can we connect the switch to the Mac? Let's see, special object info. Okay, yeah, so you can take the switches, you can link them to different objects. So let's see, which object number is the Mac? The Mac is object number 8. So we're going to take the switch and link that to object number 8. So when we hit that, we should be able to turn on or turn off the Mac. So now we give it a shot. Try glider, place it in the room. Let's see, what controls did I set up? There we go. Yeah, and so you can see the path of the glider. It tracks it. This is very clearly a pretty solid practical debugging tool. I don't want to hit the Mac, so that's cool. Here, I want to go for my alarm clock. Oh, looks like it did not didn't turn the Mac off, which is what I expected it would do. But at any rate, yeah, so you have the little bump sounds. They don't really put the sound effects out there for the debug, just to let you know that something hit. But yeah, I don't know, Shogi. I think that bare vandalism will always be in style. Though, admittedly, we might have lower class sort of like vandalism where it's just granite, no brick. Not that level of, you know, that's not a message that's meant to last. Very touch and go threat. But yeah, so that's the room editor. That's kind of how these things are made, and that brings us on to GliderPRO. So 1 second here. I actually have to open up a different emulator for this because GliderPRO, even though GliderPRO would run on System 7, it is not optimal. So I have to load up a different emulator entirely to get that going. And which, interestingly, oh, that's interesting. It reads it as the same program in this. Yeah, so here's Glider 4.0. That was actually Jump Raven is an interactive game that I enjoyed playing a lot, and I was able to find that. It was a early CD-ROM game. I don't think it was a very good game, but it had a lot of voice acting and was very cinematic and very thrilling in its time. There we go. So this is what GliderPRO is. No, I never played the Commander Keen games. I think those were PC DOS only, and I was a Mac kid. So yeah, so this is Houses of the Holy. This is the house that I made that I will share. That I made when I was did this when I was 14. That there's a lot of original pixel art in this. That guitar outside of the sort of gradient shader on the body and the body there. All of this was pixel art that I did by mouse, and I'll point out a few other things that I made in that regard. Actually, Viper, you might appreciate this as a fellow musician. Houses of the Holy was so when I was in high school, when I was 14, I was very big into Led Zeppelin. And so much so that I decided a way to pay tribute to how much I loved Led Zeppelin was to make a glider house that was themed on every Led Zeppelin album. And theming in this instance meant a few rooms that were designed with some reference to the song titles, but for the most part it just meant that each room had a title that was a Led Zeppelin reference. And there's also just some Led Zeppelin fan stuff in here. So, but yeah, just to kind of give you a look of what GliderPRO looks like. Let's see. Let's go. What's the Slumberland? I think is the default one. Yeah.
So, what are my controls here? Oh wow, I actually don't know what the Mac. Okay, cool. I need to find out what my controls are here. Ah, I always love this picture of a brain. Display, sounds, controls, brains. So, yeah, and this looks like some debug stuff that the developer left in there for his own use. Okay, so I used the those key bindings. So okay. So yeah, in the glider has some floatier physics. If you saw in Glider 4.0, you could pretty much turn on a dime. This has a little bit of slowdown before you turn. You can spin your glider around in midair. There's the Ozma painting. And one of the other things that this has is what's called... That's the music to the game, which you can turn on and off. This switch is linked to that stereo down there. But I prefer to leave it off. It's cute and charming, and I have great memories of it. But it's just, again, unfortunately, the music in this game is one of its weaker points. So, yeah, and the way that a lot of the design of GliderPRO works is switches are pretty big motivators. So you'll get to a place where you can't reach something, or you can't pass because a blower is blowing too hard, and you have to find a switch to activate an object, to change the thermostat setting of a particular blower, and then you can pass. So it's not Metroidvania-y in this sense, but it is a sort of puzzle adventure game, depending on the design. And it can also be a little arcadey when some of the runes get tough. See, that's what I was expecting the Switch to do in Glider 4.0. I always like this. Whenever the glider goes downstairs, let me show you this. So it's a very safety-conscious glider, which I imagine if you're a paper airplane, you probably are aware of your fragility and would like to take care of that. But it goes down by holding the handrail. I find that very charming. So let's tab. That's what that game looks like. And the editor in this was quite a bit more robust as well. So, okay, yeah, that house is locked. So, new house. So yeah, so let's see. You wish to create a new room? Yes, we will create a new room here. Let's see. Let's call this room Viperonics. And similar to before, you have your tiles. The tiles are a little more intuitively arranged this time. So instead of the ends of the room being kind of sandwiched up against each other, they're sort of in more natural places here. But yeah, so first room is dark. Oh yes, you have to manually light each room this time too. So let's see, go to our drop-down menu, lighting, put a light in here. You know what? That's a little bland. Let's put some track lighting in here. And appliances, etc. See, Viper likes music, so we're going to put not just one, not just two, but 3 damn stereos right here. It is open source, yes. It is, for the most part, abandonware. Cassidy and Green, who published it, went under, and rights reverted to John Calhoun, the programmer and designer. And yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste this object. We're going to drop that on down here. Drop it down here again. And let's bring all this to the front, so we are not hanging out there behind the tables and having it look weird. And let's put a blower down over here. As you can see, the interface has gotten a little better, so you can actually see where the top of the glider is. And let's have a way to win this. So, prizes, star. Yeah, so this game is won by getting all the magic stars in the house. And yeah, so leave the editor. Oh wow, that maybe is one of the easiest things to avoid, and I didn't. Huzzah! We won! There's a very strong Wizard of Oz theme. Again, Calhoun really liked to give honor to his enter finished house message here to his native Kansas. So Wizard of Oz is a very regular motif. Oh yeah, it's a lot of customization here. So again, because you could upload these to AOL or whatnot, you get a high score on your own house. There's a sort of victory banner, which is where that flies by night thing is, which is a reference to an old poem that I wrote. Adelegian flies by night. Adelegian was the name of a dragon. But yeah, so if you get high score and you beat the house creator, then you get to change the banner, and it just makes you feel like you've got a little bit more of a footprint in the thing. So with that in mind, we can look at a house that I made, and let's see. #1 glider privilege, that is right. Let's see. Where is it? Houses of the Holy. There we are. Excuse me. So yeah, so as you can see, this this background here, which has these 3 gliders heroically flying over a waking Ozma, is I removed that and I put this this Les Paul that I pixel art drew. It is missing strings, and I think that always bothered me that I never went back to do this. But this is a very large house. I put a lot of custom art into this. Let's see. I want to get back to, okay, there we go. Yeah, I put a lot of custom art into this, and yeah, I did. I drew the guitar. I drew a lot of guitars in this, and I will point them out as we go through. Let's see. There, you would get these back on the Mac. you would get these sort of kind of shareware CD-ROMs, but calling them shareware CD-ROMs sort of implies maybe a little more organization than or permission than I think the programmers were asked to provide. Basically, somebody would go onto CompuServe or AOL and download a whole bunch of sound clips, sound bites, and whatnot. And games and stuff like that, and it would put it on a shareware disk of, you know, like 400 programs and that sort of thing. And every time you get one of these, it's the same 400 programs as the last one, and that sort of thing. It's just whatever they happen to download and burn onto a disk because they had the technology to do that and distribute it. So there were always these being a nerd on the internet. Yeah, Glider had its own monthly easy, and I was involved in the fan community, man. My house for Glider 4.0 was nominated the best Glider 4.0 house of all time. I will have you know. Actually, no, it wasn't just nominated; it won. Every year they would have like house awards for best of certain categories, kind of nice little Oscars for the community. And this has to have been a group of like probably less than 100 people, but it was it was like the biggest thing in the world to me. Yeah. No, it was awesome. These were the programmers and the adults who were part of this community were heroes of mine. Oh no, thank you. I don't want you to do that at all. But yeah. So there would always be like a sound bite, sound clip folder on one of these things, and I use that fairly liberally on this. And it's very clear to give you a sense of what you're going to see on this. You're going to see a lot of Led Zeppelin fandom. You're going to see a lot of custom art that I made and some very early level design. Again, I made this when I was 14. You're going to see one fairly elaborate fart joke. It comes late game, and I'm really impressed by how much effort I put into this. Yeah, so a lot of 90s era TV stuff. There's a clip from a commercial from one of those like emergency alert commercials, and they just made it so bad. They made it laughable when in fact it needs to be a product, needs to be taken seriously. And so yeah, you're gonna find some 90s relics in this. So my dating life significantly. Oh, you flatter me. No, I was a shy kid. But yeah, so we can. Oh yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that I also found is that not just high schoolers, but a certain strain of adult too. I mean, I've got to say, it doesn't matter what the genre is, as long as the structure, setup, and payoff are good. It's good. So give me 1 second here. You're going to watch the opening to this thing play again, but it's because I need to switch the media source. So 1 second.
I'm James Howell, and this is Paper Air, a retrospect on Glider. This video trilogy looks at the Glider series of video games for pre-OS X Macintosh computers.
And that should be it. There we go. I am an in-between kid. I was born in 79, the tail end of 79. So technically was born in the 70s. I'm technically Gen X, but yeah. So I can't actually hear this because of the way that this is set up. But
good morning. This is Jimmy Page. Come on, it's time to wake up and get the lead out.
Oh yes. So yeah, one of the things that came with a bunch of that stuff was they would record rock stars would record these like intro clips for radio programs that they would like distribute to a bunch of that they would distribute to radio channels. And oh wow, this is really loud. Let me drop that down. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Anyway, as I was saying, before I was clearly competing with a very loud media source, they would record these sort of like vocal clips from rock musicians that they would play as sort of filler on radio stations. I don't know if they still do that, but yes, I was very pleased to find many of these on the early internet of Led Zeppelin. And this is a use bait to get to the switch sort of puzzle. And thank you. Oh, this was so this is a recording of me playing my old house, and one of the reasons why I'm not actually playing it live is because I actually made this thing really hard. And what needs to happen here, there's a blower there on the far right that you see near the grease jar, and that blower is currently turned off. In order to turn that blower on, I have to hit a switch. That switch is where that basketball is. In order to hit it, yes, in order to hit it, you have to shoot a rubber band just right so it ricochets down and lands. This is devious. I have no idea what I was thinking here, because you can create a smooth surface on a table, but there's like nothing that would lead somebody to think that you can like do that. Yeah, this is the super play. Oh yeah, this is one area where the game is thematically giving honor to the original. So good times, bad times. You know, you've got some meager rewards down at the bottom, and you get to the heavy rewards at the top, and there you go. They're all disappearing. So this is one of the guitars that I drew. This was Jimmy Page's, I think, his Telecaster. No, Stratocaster. Yeah, so that was entirely done pixel art by me. So was all this background stuff. Some of the pixel art stuff is better than others. But the guitars are the ones that I'm particularly proud of. I wouldn't call myself a sadist. I would call myself somebody who just didn't know that good level design was about communicating and fulfilling. So this is another piece of art. One of my favorite writing teachers gave me this coffee mug that had this image on it, and I used that as a reference, and I basically replicated it perfectly. This was another guitar. I think this would have been Jimmy Page's Les Paul, laying down on its side. And yeah, I found bad cars very funny in high school. So yeah, that's what that's about. And I think this level design is kind of neat. You have absolutely no obligation to go for it, but the rewards are balanced. So if you yeah, the Yugo was amazing. It was the Yugo was a little rolling disaster there, and 9 times out of 10 rolling if it was going downhill, because it would not reliably run. I think it probably doesn't do the Pinto justice to put it there alongside it, because the Yugo is uniquely bad. That's my favorite one. That is the Les Paul. I did that pixel art by entirely by hand from a magazine reference. So I'm very pleased with that. And yeah, this is actually kind of smart level design, because now there's a reward that you can get to, and only when you get past all the obstacles do you have access to it. This is pretty sure there's like a drum solo here that I'm not hearing. This is yeah, this is John Bonham, probably an excerpt from Moby Dick, I think it was, which is his big drum solo Zeppelin piece, which is really good. I mean, drum solos are sort of a subject of much humor, but man, Moby Dick is solid. So this is my favorite area in the game. I did all the background stuff. I did all the background art here for the cave entrance, and and that I'm sort of leaning on the grace of the tinfoil. That lantern I'm particularly proud of. I feel like that's got a good sense of balance, and the color on that is good. Yeah, Led Zeppelin 3 is probably my favorite album. I really liked the folk overtones of it. I do not. Oh wait, so here's the thing with this: that basketball is covering the exit, and the thing is, somebody who played Glider would know this. You have to find a switch to activate it, and then you can proceed. No, I only share that in hushed undertones to those who are privileged enough for me to trust that they'll understand the glory of that accolade. And so, yeah, here's Jimmy Page's Telecaster. You fly into the noose, fly out of the noose. Again, no reason why somebody would think that you could slide on these outside of experimentation. Oh, so this is me playing guitar. This was me playing guitar. This sound clip is coming up. And yeah, I feel I was better than I felt I was at the time. But yeah, thank you. That was the sort of main chord progression from the song that room takes its title from. And yes, the in the middle of this heathen den, this Walpurgis night mountainside, there is a witch whose time has come to an end. I feel like there's a stark difference in quality of that pixel art guitar that I made and that bone and this moon, this angry moon. I do like the three witches in the distant alcove doing their witch things, possibly mourning the loss of the witch whose remains we found. But yeah, the folksy, the folk feeling of a lot of Led Zeppelin 3 spoke very strongly to me, and I think it actually informs a lot of what I like to play musically now. So there we go. Yeah, we hit the switch, the basketball's going, and now we can proceed. Those microwaves, the foil power up, it basically gives you armor. You can take a few hits that would normally kill you. And 9 times out of 10, this Frameworks is not actually a Led Zeppelin song title. I just broke form here because I wanted to do something neat. Because, you know, I'm not... I'll commit to the bit 95% of the time. Oh, yes. Yes, this is lovely. So yes, a fine way to combine my my love of Monty Python, as my high school love of Monty Python, with Jimmy Page's signature hermit wizard sort of persona there. That's a Marshall stack. I drew that one as well. And these are my 2 favorite guitars side by side. No, I don't know if these are my 2 favorite, but they're 2 good ones. The Les Paul is absolutely my favorite that I drew. Oh yeah, if you can find the song remains the same, the live album, and if you can get the listen to the version of Moby Dick that's on that, and it is inspirational. Oh, this is also very good. So that's the opening. That's the rhythm to the song "When the Levee Breaks," which is a Led Zeppelin take on a blues number, and it is just exquisite. I think they recorded in a stairwell to get a lot of really good echo on it, and it sounds amazing. I had a Les Paul. Oh, this is my favorite, the double neck guitar. I did such a good job on this one. I'm so proud of this. Oh, yeah. No, if you watch The Song Remains the Same, you'll see Jimmy Page playing Stairway to Heaven on that, switching between the 12-string and the 6-string necks, and it is just, it's kind of mind-blowing. I hear that sort of guitar showmanship is considered machismo bravado now. I don't know how true that is, but oh yes, so this is lovely. So beware the rabbit. Homer Simpson, what the hell are you talking about? And of course there's a secret room down here, which is we're getting to. Yes. So yes.
Did you listen to me? Oh no, you knew it all, didn't you? Oh, it's just a harmless little bunny, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, Monty Python, a lot of Python. This is very hard because again, brutal level design. You have to sort of negotiate up that vent, and if you die, I put the spawn point right in the path of the basketball. So if you fail once, you have a very high chance of failing completely. You know, again, one of these things that learning level design early and feeling something that is just brutally hard is fun and good. Now this is a challenge, and I think this is actually a little more interesting. So similar to the puzzle before, where you have to time a rubber band shot right to turn on a switch, I have to hit this thermostat. And what's kind of interesting about that is if you miss the wrong way, the rubber band will ricochet and hit you, and you yourself will ricochet against that wall and then against the cabinet. So there's actually a little bit of a risk at getting it wrong. It's not just sort of boring, and I think that's kind of interesting. It is a very clutch shot, though. Freebird was also a big favorite of mine back then. Freebird and Stairway, they have in common, they have that sort of dramatic build up and payoff going for them. Shogi, how many attempts did it take for me to do this playthrough? I want to say about 5 or 6. There are some levels in here that are very skill demanding, and I feel very proud of having made those. All the same, they are also made for people who are already enthusiasts of the game and who will gladly spend hours trying to figure out how to get past your house, because it was a community where, you know, we just all love to do that sort of thing. And so yeah, I like the space. I like how the space is broken up there, with one side of the room inaccessible with that wall, and then having to go through this vent. And I don't think I made that planet Earth. I definitely made that sailing ship, but I don't think I made that planet Earth. I might have found that online. I did make that American flag. And it has nothing to do with Dire Maker. But let's see, how do I... Viper, can you use, or Shogi, can you use your mod pod? Thank you. I appreciate that. The basketball is bouncing on top of the hole because there's a sentient glider. And this is a world with properties none of us may understand. I actually quite like the flow of this this room. It's coming up here. The one that's just to the right of the current one. It's great when you get a... Yeah, it's like this sort of stairwell design. It always felt very good to me. I also made that telephone, which I think I would do that differently now, but and I did not make that guitar. That's not my style at all. But I found that one online because Braun Your Hour is a beautiful beautiful acoustic piece that I actually played that one live for a church charity event or something like that. It was like a talent show, and you know, kids performed, and their parents and parent and family friends would donate money and that sort of thing. And I learned that song and I played it, and it was good. I played it quite well, I think. So that's a very special one to me. I think Physical Graffiti might be hands down their overall best album. Yeah, apparently I'm good at it, and I guess I never... oh yeah, this is just brutal. Oh, this is actually very funny. I like this.
Now go away or I shall taunt you a second time.
I think that's delightful. Again, I loved a lot of Python. Yeah, no, I'm better than I feel like I am. So I mean, I have a lot of room to grow. So I'm not going to say I'm great, but I will say I like how good I am. Is probably a good way of balancing the pride and humility. And there's some more rabbits, because, you know, fear them. I have not met him, but he was very kind to me when I was younger, and I would write fan letters, and he would respond to them. He was very encouraging along the path of making video games, or at least the path of computer programming. Games were sort of a second thing for him, I think. He was a developer with Apple for a very long time. I don't know if he would remember this specifically, but and there were definitely a lot of people in that very close-knit community who found his willingness to support and participate in the fan community very inspiring. So yeah, he was a cool guy. And this is about the place where I think I started running out of ideas. In part also because Presence is sort of around the time I have no idea what this thing is, other than the fact that it kind of looks like the monolith sort of object that you see on the Presence album cover again. And yeah, so this is Python and the Holy Grail, of course, and a lot of Python in this room. I think the fart joke is coming up. We can only hope. Oh yes, this was I think this was a Homer Simpson inspired room. I think this is supposed to be a donut shop. I like the flow of this room quite a lot. I like the fact that everything is still. It's a very easy path. You go through, so you understand exactly how to get through. You get the star, then all of a sudden the danger turns on, and then you have to figure out how to do what you just did easily, except now with the challenges, and I like that. And there's a picture of some carrots I drew, because why not? Yeah, I've been watching some of those old episodes lately, and they really do hold up. Yeah, Braun Your R was also released on this one, so oh yeah, here we go. So, is it a something rule of thumb? I can't quite read it. Don't let's see, chili and something don't mix. I can't quite read it. Anyway, yes, it's oh yeah, chili and smoking don't mix. So yeah, there you go. Spent a lot of time making the art for that. I also enjoyed llamas quite a lot. Llamas were very funny animals. Very charming animals. And I believe... Oh yeah, there's the whole crew right there. Yeah, there you go. Man, I'm a word. It's you could even go up and kind of give it a poke. So, I think I had a previous house that had heavy llama presence in it, and that might be a reference to that. Probably llama, although I don't know, alpaca's pretty good. Oh, I like this. I like the shape of this area quite nicely as well. This sort of a vertical house. I also like this because there are treasures that you cannot get the first descent through, but once you change the environment enough on your first time through, then you can go back and get those other treasures. So I actually think that's fairly sophisticated. I think that's I'm gonna congratulate my younger self on that one. I think the only real criteria that we have for oh yeah, there's also something clever you can do there too. If you accidentally hit the lower switch up there, you'll turn on the microwave. The microwave takes away all of your power-ups. So if you choose not to hit that switch, then you can keep all of your power-ups, which definitely helps you on your second time through to get the rewards. And I was always a fan of zigzagging level design in this game. Also a fan of ships floating on clouds. Excuse me. So yeah, so two possible exits here. One of them will take you back to the top. The other one will take you forward. It doesn't really signal which one does which. You just kind of have to know. It's not backtracking, it's reliving. Now you get to revisit it and... Wait, no, this is literally backtracking. Shut up! Don't judge me. Yeah, there we go. Oh, this was a very risky moment in the playthrough because I ran out of the battery, which it gives you a little bit of zoom, and I was counting on that to get me through the revisit. That's true. That's true. It's like, you know what? We need to get an extra few hours out of this. What if we reskinned everything? That's right, Born to Game Dev. I always liked the notion that the glider was vain enough to dance in front of the mirror. It always made me laugh. Oh, yes. So, if you were around in the 90s, you will recognize that from a commercial that yes, it's one of those like click a button and it alerts the police for the elderly or people with low mobility, and it's unfortunate because it is a really important product, but they managed to create an advertisement that, yeah, Life Alert, thank you, that's it. But they managed to create like an advertisement that it just was delivered so goofily that it was, I mean, just, yeah, as Viper said, a classic. I really like the red here. I made this background because I love these reds so much. This is when I think I wanted to be a graphic designer at this point, but it turns out I just liked art. I didn't want to make a career out of it. Oh, I think probably my favorite room out of all of this is coming up. And I'll tell you why. I think it is clever, it is a puzzle, and it also has Twitch. Yes, this is it. Okay, so there is that vent that at the end of the grease trail down there at the very bottom turns on when you hit the thermostat. or no, I'm sorry, that one turns off, and another vent turns on up there, up at the top. When you get to the apex of this vent, of this air blowing thing right here, you hit an invisible switch which turns it off. So you have to go back down and turn it on again. You have to use, so basically it doesn't carry you all the way up to the top. It carries you high enough to turn off the air, so you go back down, and so you get basically a little bounce. You have to use the first bounce to use a rubber band to hit the grease, and then you have to use the second bounce to get over onto it. And again, this sounds really abstruse and sort of arcane, just sort of explaining it. If you had played the game at the time, you would have known a lot of this stuff, so it would have been much more intelligible. Yeah, I always thought that was good. Oh, I think here we are. I think we're near the end. Yeah, these are timed air vents that turn on. Slowly bump you toward the star. That was from The Point, which is a sort of 70s allegorical story by Harry Nilsson that I liked quite a lot back then as well. And I have no idea who Redbeard is. I hope that's me, because if not, somebody else beat my house, and I had to download it. Yeah. So a thing about hunting down all of these houses for my own access, and then perhaps for preservation, is a lot of the Glider fan sites that have existed they're gone. There was a Yahoo group which had a lot of them, and Yahoo groups are, well, just a wasteland now. So the only copies of my own work that I've been able to find, I have some discs, but I don't have a computer that can read them, and I have no idea if they even still work. But the only copies of my own houses that I was able to find were houses they had been played by other people. So I've downloaded many of them, and they had other people's high scores on there, and some of them higher than my own, which in retrospect, that's good, right? Because if you're a developer and you want to set a score challenge for somebody, you don't get the highest score possible, because then that's unbeatable. You want to encourage somebody to actually attain something. So that was a smart thing to do. Whether that was deliberate or not, I don't know. But because 14 was a while back. But yeah. So I was. It's interesting because it doesn't have the pristineness of an original copy of it. Original copy sounds like a contradiction, but isn't. An original version of it. But there's also the gratitude of finding it and understanding that people actually played it, and they played it to completion. And that's very satisfying, and that's one of the reasons why that fan community had such good hooks, because they loved making houses. They loved making fanzines about the houses, which I actually co-founded one of the fanzines, as a matter of fact. I didn't keep up with it because I just didn't have time to, but yeah, anyway. But yeah, they loved making houses, they loved writing about houses, they loved talking about them, and they loved playing them. And when you get that kind of feedback loop, it makes creating things feel pretty good. And I think that maybe something, I don't know, I've heard Roblox is something that's kind of like that for kids now. But yeah, that's Glider. I think it could be fun if time ever permitted. I don't know if it ever would. In fact, I'm going to say it probably never will. It would be fun to make a house on stream and kind of put something like that together. It'd be nice to revisit this with the tools that I have now and the know-how. But yeah, so Viper, Peacher, Shogi, it's great to see y'all, and I will be live on Wednesday with more Monkey Island. Target start time is about 8:30. That tends to need to be a little flexible because of family stuff, but yeah, we'll see. So Thank you, Viper. It's always great to see you, man. And I think that I would love to host a sort of emulation package of glider materials. The only downside to that is that there actually is still a legal problem with the disk images of old Macintosh hard drives that use Apple system versions 6 through 8. So that's not something that can be sort of like legally or high profile distributed. So unfortunately that's the case, but yeah, I would like for this to be preserved in some way, because as it stands, I think this is yeah, exactly. There are these little things that you think that because it's obsolete technology, maybe nobody would care, but it is still, there is still legal ownership over it, which, you know, as soon as you trip that wire, it's pretty much black and white. In that instance, there's usually very little negotiation when you're dealing with claims of legal ownership, especially from a large company like Apple. And that is not a fight worth fighting. Just put up a web page with a graphic how to emulate this software, provided you have the tools that are legally acquired. So anyway, thanks for coming out, and hope to see you all on Wednesday. And if not, hope to see you soon after that. Good night, or good day to you, Viper.